Hey everyone, my name is Kim. In this video, I'm going to review the steps necessary to change the upper transmission gears in your X-Range Propel. This task requires a 24-hour Loctite cure time before reassembly and use on the water. Let's start by discussing the parts, tools, and supplies needed for this repair. First, you will need to get an upper gear replacement kit. You will find this kit on our Native Watercraft website. Parts in this kit include the crank gear and the upper fairing gear. Now onto the tools and supplies needed to replace the upper gears. You will need an 8mm hex key, digital or click torque wrench, crank arm puller, variable pin spanner wrench with 7mm pins, 3mm hex key, 25-28mm hook wrench, mineral oil, cotton swabs, finish line premium grease, denatured alcohol, liquid primer. We use Loctite SF7649, a medium Loctite blue 243, a strong Loctite red TL71, and a clean rag or toothbrush. We begin by replacing the crank gear. This requires that we start by removing the crank arms with pedals. Use the 8mm hex key to loosen and remove the crank bolts. Then, thread the crank arm puller into the threads of the crank arms and remove the crank arms. Using the 7mm pin spanner wrench, remove the right side cap. Place the wrench pins into the recessed holes on the cap and turn. Ensure that the pins are fully inserted into the holes before turning for best results. Then, insert the end of the drive cap crank spindle into the right side crank arm. Wipe any grease or debris off of the lock nut and gear. Remove the lock nut using the 25-28 hook wrench. Clean existing Loctite off of the lock nut with denatured alcohol, a toothbrush, and a rag. Set it to the side. Remove the old gear. Wipe crank spindle threads with denatured alcohol and a rag and toothbrush to remove the old Loctite. Prime threads of the drive cap crank spindle and set aside. Wipe excess grease off of the new gear and slide it onto the drive cap until it reaches the gear ledge. You want to make sure that it is level with the cap. Apply 1 drop of Loctite TL71 to the crank thread spindles. Screw the lock nut onto the gear by hand and tighten to 0 with the hook wrench. Set aside for overnight cure. Next, we replace the upper fairing gear. Start by wiping clean any grease or debris surrounding the upper transmission gear and screw. Place your 3mm hex key securely into the transmission screw on top of the gear. Spin the propeller to loosen and remove the screw. Clean the old Loctite off of the screw with a rag, toothbrush, and denatured alcohol. Set aside. Now, reach in and pull the gear out. Set aside. Use a denatured alcohol-soaked cotton swab to clean the internal threads on the transmission rod to remove dried Loctite and grease. I am inverting the propel unit so that the transmission rod will drop down. This makes it easier to install the gear. Prepare your new gear by wiping away excess grease. Slip the gear onto the upper fairing end of the transmission rod. Place 1 drop of Loctite 243 directly onto the screw you set aside earlier and install it into the rod at the top of the gear. Rotate the propeller to tighten the screw to 0, then unscrew slightly until the propeller spins freely. Test for knocking by pressing the screw upwards. There should be little to no up and down action. If there is action, tighten the screw slightly until the action is slight to nothing. Once you have allowed the Loctite to cure for 24 hours, you can reassemble the pedal drive. First, use a rag or toothbrush with denatured alcohol to clean out the cap threads on the upper cast to remove old Loctite and grease. Carefully do the same with the drive cap threads. Next, prepare your drive cap and gears for installation. Oil the O-ring on the drive cap with a cotton swab soaked in mineral oil. Grease the drive cap and upper fairing gear with finish line grease. Place 1 or 2 drops of mineral oil in the trough of the non-drive cap seal. Gently slide the drive cap crank spindle into the non-drive seal and push until you reach the point when you are ready to screw it into the upper cast. Screw the cap in until you feel the gears meet. Using the propeller to spin the upper fairing gear, center the gears and continue screwing the cap down with the 7mm spanner wrench until it is flush with the upper casting. Check to see if you have meshed the gears correctly by spinning the propeller. If the gears feel bound, uninstall the drive cap and start again. Wipe oils off each end of the crank spindle and install the crank arms to 26 feet per pound with a digital torque wrench. Your X-Range Propel is ready to hit the water and help you catch those fish. One final note, check out our troubleshooting video at the end of this playlist. It addresses common problems you may encounter along with their solutions. As always, contact your local dealer if you have any additional questions. Thanks for watching.